We are now starting episode 6 of our Autonomous Humanity podcast with our second guest, actually, Jon Ongtingco, as I was just corrected, rightfully so. We actually go back quite a few years now, where we met as part of an organization. If you don't mind, I'd love to hear your take on that.
Absolutely. PowerCore is the organization. It's a referrals group. I've been in it for many years. And basically, I was at the same meeting as you. I was very interested in what you did. I've always been fascinated with all kinds of technology. And you're one of the first people I've met who actually worked with drones. So it was an instant, hey, I need to meet this guy. And so I passed you the referral, and the rest is kind of history.
Very cool. And so, again, while a lot of this podcast previously has been about technology, politics, last episode we had a music guest. I just remember going back to our conversation, outside of PowerCore. Of course, enjoyed our experiences working together as part of our team up in Alpharetta. Basically, we have regional teams, or maybe not regional because it's all Atlanta based. I know Wendy had a group or a part out in Texas at one time. Are you familiar with
Florida.
That? Florida, okay. Yeah. So it shows how much I know. But in any case, Jon actually became the coach of our team. And like I said, he, I think, reached out, scheduled a meeting as it works in these sort of groups. And similarly, I'm always interested in people working in technology. And so Jon and I kind of hit it off. And do you remember what pizza restaurant? It was like a...
Pizza Crosta.
Pizza Crosta.
Doesn't even exist anymore.
Okay, because I was like, was it your pie? Because it was like very similar.
Very similar, yeah.
Yeah, very similar. But yeah, that was right off of like Roswell, Road, Sandy
That's
Springs.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right there by the ice forum, I think.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just kind of interesting that unfortunately, then after I left PowerCore back in, I forget exactly when, sometime in maybe March of 2019,
yeah.
Just because, and this is kind of an excuse, right? But I just did not know how I was going to be able to continue doing all the networking I was doing through PowerCore, predominantly for our business, which was really a media business that used off-the-shelf drones at the time. I just met, I'd been working with a guy for, come on down, Bev, if you'd like. You're not going to disrupt us. But in any case, we started developing our first drone back in March of 2019, and very shortly thereafter realized that I can't really manage this drone development, still do all this networking through PowerCore, which I still think if anyone's in business, getting started with business, I mean, every business is a people business at the end of the day. You got to go out, meet people, and you never know when it's going to come back and circle around. And I probably should have, touched base with you, many times over the last few years, just to keep, the conversations between us going. But then, I don't know, 5-6 years now, since working together through PowerCore, I just had an opportunity. I was able to pass along your way, and it's just you never know where those sort of connections are going to be able to come back around full circle and manifest in a way that can actually provide value. But without going too much down that tangent, if you wouldn't mind explain a little bit about your background getting into technology, why you started SOHO, and what you guys do there.
Sure. So I was going to Georgia Tech. I was actually working at UPS at the time, which is a very manual job, not much thinking going on there. And I got on with what I guess at the time was called an interconnect company. They did mostly phone systems. And when they brought me on, we started building voicemail systems. At the time, voicemail systems weren't the ubiquitous thing they are now. So the owner had his own product that we were building out computers for, and that's where I kind of fit in. And we kind of branched out a little bit with that company and started doing computer stuff. And then from there, I went to a USDA project, which was nationwide. I stayed there for a couple of years, and at that time I left going to Georgia Tech, so I was dedicated to that project for 2 years. When I came back, I was like, I don't want to do anything hard. Yep. Became a technician for a company called ITC Deltacom. And I was there for about a year, and one of the engineering guys said, "Why are you a technician?" And he brought me into the engineering side. So I started doing what was at the time called technical consulting, basically making sure what the salespeople sold would actually work with whatever the customer had. So I had to work a lot with, at the time, the top-end technology, T1s, it was a lot of fun stuff, and got a lot of good experience at that job. And been working there for 5 years in the engineering department, and saw that there were so many people out there trying to do IT and weren't doing it exactly well, and said this is an opportunity to start a company, fill in this gap. And when we first started, we mostly did work for the other, what they were called CLECs at the time. They hardly exist now. And we were doing the cutovers, helping the customers get transitioned from one to the other. The customer would usually end up saving some kind of money, and then they would get the better internet speed. Again, T1, which isn't even used now, Anyone that's on T1 is behind the times.
And what those used to, at least one point in time, like tens of thousands of dollars to get a T1 line installed.
Sometimes,
yeah,
yes.
To if it wasn't in that area, of course, to your house or, a business. And
right.
I guess what has been like the largest shift that you've seen, over the course of your work in the IT field? Obviously you've seen a lot, but anything like stick out to you more than anything else?
Internet communications is the one, because when I started, 56K modem. My first modem was 1200 baud. Going all the way back to then, back to the time when someone picked up the phone in your house, you got disconnected. In the middle of what your download was. At the beginning, protocols like X modem and Z modem were just starting to come out, and these were the protocols that could start your download over instead of just losing the whole thing. So starting from that, going through AOL, some of those other providers, Imagination Network, stuff like that, and then jumping into T1, we just keep getting better and better at the communication. Now it's hard to go somewhere where you don't have either a Wi-Fi connection or some other broadband connection available to you. So that is the biggest change, being able to just go anywhere,
be connected,
and have that connection. The only time I get away from it is when I'm out hiking.
Right.
You get in the middle of the woods, you don't have a signal.
And even with some modern like Starlink type of systems, like you could put that in a backpack, and obviously, not really sensical, for going hiking, and it's going to be a run-of-the-mill trip that you're not going days and days out into the wilderness. But I've even heard that iPhone or Apple recently has announced Starlink integration directly into the iPhone. So you will just be able to the phone in your pocket, giving you cancer,
That's the weird part of that, right?
Right.
Will it be a problem? Because even, I guess about 6 years ago, there was a report that came out about how much is allowed in our cell phones versus how much we're actually getting. And a lot of the cell phone manufacturers are pushing that limit sometimes. And the question is it actually a problem or not? No one really knows, I think.
But I think we turn a blind eye to it, like many of the problems that us as individuals or us as society, has. It's easier just to kick the can down the road and pretend it's not a problem, right? And I think Apple, they will even announce, like, if you have a pacemaker especially, or even if you don't have a pacemaker, you're not supposed to wear your iPhone in your front pocket because it can mess with your heart, and especially if it's a pacemaker. That's no good, right? So I think there's a lot of that, outside of, the context that we're talking about it here. Politics is, I think, a clear example, or you could find a lot of clear examples of that in politics as well. But you mentioned just like the evolution of communications, touching on the modem. And I know you mentioned you're an Atlanta native, right? Which is, in a transplant city, exceedingly rare, right? I mean, you were talking about, growing up in like the Marietta, part of Atlanta, like where there was cows, like pasture fields, and now you have to come up, past our neck of the woods to start seeing that. And I remember even just in my time, seeing some of the change. So you are very probably familiar with Hayes microcomputer products, right? Does that ring a bell? Like they were like one of the first people in the modem space.
Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking they were famous for their modems. I mean, I think they set a protocol of some type. I don't remember
AT
exactly.
commands. If you've heard of those AT commands.
Yes.
Yeah. Funnily enough, another kind of full circle, within the last year and a half, we've actually started working with Dennis Hayes that started Hayes Micro.
Really?
Yeah. He's, again, older, like in retirement now, but now trying to help startup technology companies, much like ours. And it's funny that the radios used in our drones actually use these AT command sets that, he invented, and pioneered within the modem space. So you're just talking about that. I was like, oh, yeah, you're definitely going to be familiar, more so than the average bear, so to speak, having grown up here in Atlanta where that was all happening, being in the IT tech space. And
it's funny how fuzzy that is, because I remember having to set up modems that would communicate out of band with channel banks and routers. And yes, it was all ATDT commands that you had to put in there. I couldn't probably do it today. I'd need a refresher course. But yeah, we had to play with all of that.
And now, I know you talked a lot about the change in communications, the benefit obviously from being connected all the times. What do you see as some of the downfalls that brings, if any?
Well, we're losing our humanity. I mean, that seems pretty obvious. Look at any kid that's walking around in a park, and instead of being on the swings, he's in the corner with the device.
Or having a computer screen up in front of him, having a conversation. Yeah.
Well, and you talk about this like in the business setting, and PowerCore is strongly not just discouraged, but you shouldn't do it,
right,
of having your screen on a table. And it's because it's a distraction, and you never know that it might go off, and all of a sudden you're looking at it, and then the person's wondering, are you even paying attention to me?
Right.
Yeah. Have you run into that?
Oh, big time, yeah. Social media, it's making us less social, actually.
It feels like.
Or, the technology it's one of the challenges.
And again, it's easy to say the technology, right? But again, I've been able to use, I've heard a lot, less so I think over the last year or two, a lot of, pardon my French, shit talk about platforms like Facebook I'll join in the same sort of, shit talk about TikTok, or as I like to call it, Tic-Tac, but it's all about you as the individual, about how you use the platform, right? No one's not that I'm aware of, no one in my life is being held at gunpoint.
Right.
You have to use Tic-Tac every day, mindlessly for, hours and hours on end, right? And it also goes back to, a thought I have, kind of its own little rabbit hole, There's the whole thought well, I had these problems as a kid, right? And, I'm just going to let that define me for the rest of my life versus, all right, I recognize that happened, but life happens and you move on. And it's all goes back to that personal responsibility. At some point, you got to realize enough is enough. This isn't providing the value that I want it to be. It's literally just extracting value from my life, right? But there are ways to use those platforms, where we send out videographers, drone pilots, photographers all around, mostly around Georgia still at this point, but a few jobs here and there across the United States. And we're able to meet those people through platforms like Facebook, where they have groups of, professional photographers or videographers or drone pilots. And so, I mean, there is definitely now everyone has a voice, right? And it's a double-edged sword, for lack of a better way to put it. And again, we're still in such the early days that, I mean, I look back at being the prime generation of, growing up with social media before people actually realize what that looks like. And if anyone wants to have a good time, go on to my Facebook and you can go see, posts I made from when I was a 13-year-old kid, a 12-year-old kid, that not the best representation of me today, but I think it's also important, at least in my perspective, to show who you are, actually as who you are, where it's become so common on social media to just put out the best parts of you, right? And of course, you don't want to in business, right? A large part of the name of the game is selling yourself, right? So you don't want to put out content that purposely makes yourself look bad. But, I think it really helps, at least this is how I try to frame it up, some of the content that I purposely still leave up there. Not that I think any of it was bad or with a bad intent, right? But it was oh, wow, Jacob is, obviously to you guys, right? Just like a normal person, you know, like, yeah, not normal, right? But
Speak for yourself, bud.
yeah. But I think you guys kind of get what I'm trying to say, and that it's very easy to like get caught up in all the negative aspects of social media, right? But there are some benefits, and even though it may not be a benefit to me leaving up some of like the older content, like one as an example that I probably shouldn't even like bring up in particular, but like 12, 13 years old, I have a video on like my personal YouTube channel, jackass home video of me going down like the stairs in like a laundry basket and, you know, flying out of the laundry basket. And, you know, to me, imagine if you were to, and I'm not saying I'm actually going to be able to live up to this sort of impact on society, but imagine if you did have like a sort of cool, like fun moment from like Henry Ford's childhood or something like that, you know, like Jim and I have talked about this in like the President's Day episode. Like it's so easy to like lose sight of like some of these larger than life sort of figures, you know, like the founding fathers, big titans of industry, whatever. And then if you actually just remember that there were people, and what's documented in books and documentaries or whatever is such a small little sliver, kind of like social media, pre-social media, right? That it's easy to forget that they had just as many problems. I mean, one that I didn't bring up in the President's Day episode, that jumping over to the politics side, Teddy Roosevelt famously said, like, I can take care of this country or I can take care of my daughter, but I can't do both, right? And imagine if someone like Trump were to come out and say, like, I can't take care of my kids and this country at the same time. The country would be more on fire than it already is, you know, with all like the Teslas and everything burning.
Right.
But
Trump says he cannot take care of his own kin.
Right.
Can you believe that? It would be...
And then, you know, it's not like we just had our past president with a son that was, you know, off the rails, you know, allegedly with cocaine in the White House and, you know, having a good old time. And, you know, people, of course, will oftentimes get up in arms even for just bringing up Trump's name in a non-negative light, right? And I heard something recently that it is kind of like what we were talking, like the First Amendment auditors. There's some that are just like going out there trying to push buttons. And
Right.
I don't use this as like a good faith argument, but like as much as I've come to like Trump over the years, I'm really more of a Biden guy myself. You know, Hunter Biden and I would get along just, you know, and obviously that's a joke, you know, not actually trying to have a good faith conversation, you know, using a line like that. But I don't know, for something like this, I don't know, a good way to kind of.
So can I ask real quick, John, so can you tell us who are your top clients?
Wow, talk about a shift.
Yeah, sorry, because I'm curious about the SOHO.
Or maybe even ideal clients, right? Like what's like the type of work that like you would love to see more of? I mean, again, that's actually something that if you want to talk more about offline was like what I shared with you, like Sebastian, like obviously him as a person, would you like to work with him more? And like that type of work, is that like what is well within the wheelhouse of what you guys like doing?
So small office, home office, that's what our name stands for.
Okay.
And that is the space we try to stay in. I like the small customer. That's really my bread and butter. The 5 to 10 person office. I think that they're the people that need the help. The large companies, Coke, you know, Home Depot, they've either got their own internal people or someone that's going to really want to help them. I prefer helping the smaller guy. We've got a lot of 1 and 2 man law offices out there. I say man, persons.
Right.
Be honest, most of our law offices are female.
Right.
So we do our best to help those size offices. I feel like it's a space that's missed. Most companies look at them as almost a burden. They don't really want the smaller size monthly payment, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I really set forth to try and help the ones who aren't getting the help that they need from other companies. They don't want the one-off time. That's my bread and butter. I will be glad to take your machine that may have a virus on it, check it out, and return it back to you within a day. You know, so it's really filling that gap that I'm looking for.
And what you guys do, because, you know, I came into this conversation, I know y'all know one another and met before, but can you just give a quick little summation of what exactly SOHO does.
Anything with communications in the IT world. We try to be whatever our customer needs us to be. If our customer needs us to come in and run a cable to a new location because they're hiring a new person and they want that cable in that specific spot in that office, we'll come in and do that. If they need a computer set up, we'll do that. Viruses removed, and anything in between. We do maintenance for some of our customers. It was something that I initially avoided. I felt like the maintenance game was just that, a game. It was a way of charging a customer $3,000 a month and not actually doing much work for it and just saying, oh yeah, we maintained your computers. Right. It turns out there is actually a lot of valid things going on behind maintenance. There's a lot that needs to be checked, especially if you're under some kind of compliance. There's logs that need to be checked daily. There's backups that need to be checked. So we have taken that on and started to do that for our customers over the years. Again, 19 years of change in one sentence there. So really making sure that that's all happening is what we're aiming for our customers. And we try, at the same time, try to fit their budget and what they want. Some customers want that monthly check-in, weekly check-in, daily check-in. So we really try to mesh what it is that they're after.
Really quick, to that end, from the maintenance perspective and checking in, I know that's something like with some of the video production work that we do where there's like this paid software program to run like a live broadcast, like a live production of a sports event. And really, there's no more value out of that software versus like the free open source software that we're using, other than you get a person to call and they're going to, make it work, or do everything that's possible to make it work if it's not working. And I think, while it's easy to like, oh yeah, that's not real value to people, but just having that phone, like, hey, I'm going to be able to call SOHO and get someone on the phone, and within 24 hours, our problem is going to be solved, and not have to put much more thought into it. Right. I mean,
for a business today, if the technology shuts down or stops working right, that business grinds to a halt, pretty much real time, on the minute. So, and you guys are on call, right, with all your customers, your clients. If there's a problem, they're going to call you. You guys are now on the clock to fix that so that that company can continue, get back online or whatever, and making money and serve customers and whatnot. It's a high pressure job, really. I think at the end of the day, would you agree that
it can be?
Your call at times, you have to be ready to perform because you're called for it.
And we're lucky in the sense that a lot of our customers, we had some nightclubs back when we first started, and you'd want to talk about a midnight call, 2 a.m. call. Yeah. And sometimes for the weirdest things, our ATM doesn't work anymore. So
yeah, that's a showstopper.
All right, the tragic ones is because someone was dancing nearby and unplugged it, and they couldn't. So I'm kind of glad that those days are gone, the 2 a.m. calls from the nightclubs. But at the same time, you're right. We do occasionally get the weekend or late evening calls from customers that are in Hawaii, for instance, and they can't get their email. Well, we're going to answer that call and do whatever we can to get their email running. We do use the specialty tools that a lot of people use. I won't say names just because I don't want to advertise necessarily for them, but having that in place for those customers and being on point and being able to get that done quickly is really paramount to our business, I think.
Cool.
One thing I saw that I really resonated with, because especially in the tech space, it's so easy to be like, and I think we both are tech nerds, right? Yeah. But it's so easy to like get caught up in like the technical solution or what's technically possible. And the customers, like, whether it's making their internet work, they don't care about how it's like, they just want it to work, right? Same thing with our drones. They don't care. Some of our customers that are becoming developers, engineers do care, but by and large, people don't care about how the drone works. They just want it to work, right? And I read that on your website. I was like, it's very rare to find a tech person that actually gets it from like the person, business, and like it's easy to just like wrap it up as a business perspective, but like the value that the person actually wants, like distilling it to what they actually want, and not like, hey, I want this service to make my internet work well. I just want my internet to work well, right? So I guess if you don't mind going back again, kind of switching gears from the evolution that you've seen from a business perspective, again, for a lot of our listeners who, are really in our network right now, your network, going to be at least local to Atlanta now. What sort of shifts as a lifelong Atlanta resident have been like most apparent to you outside of your career? Do any come to mind? I mean, obviously like the cows and, pastures.
Right.
If you talk, maybe literally how the area's grown, but even culturally or, has anything really surprised you over the last, couple decades or so?
I don't know if surprise is the right word. I think it's interesting to watch how our infrastructure has changed, and traffic's a constant problem.
Yep.
And it seems like, as far back as I can remember what they used to call the 4-lane. This is now Cobb Parkway or 41. Everybody called it the 4-lane. It was the only 4-lane road in the area. So if someone said 4-lane, everybody knew what you were talking about. You can't say that these days because our infrastructure has grown so much. And now we've got the express lanes, for instance.
Right.
Have you ever used them? I love them.
Yeah. Only with a peach pass. I've used them.
Right. Need the peach pass.
Yeah.
But it does save a lot of time if you're willing to pay that cost. I kind of like that. It's not fair to everybody necessarily, but it's an advantage we have. And I think that's one of the good things that they've added to our infrastructure, and you get the decision whether or not to use it. Unlike 400, you had to pay that toll every time, whether you wanted to or not. So I like it better in that aspect, that we've grown towards that and the option to use the faster approach or not. It's also just fun to get on the expressway, especially going up 75, because you're so much higher. You can see so much more of the landscape, which has changed tremendously. And now Smyrna's about to get I think a 4-story office building right there in the middle by the square. So big
The
changes.
Atlanta sprawl is continuing.
Yeah.
I mean, literally the whole state of Georgia will just become Atlanta sooner than later. It feels like.
Everybody already says they're from Atlanta. It doesn't matter if you're in Logan,
Alpharetta or
Alpharetta.
Cumming.
I'm from Atlanta.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, that is absolutely what I say, when we go up to like Dennis Hayes' program up in South Carolina. Oh, where are you coming from? Atlanta. Oh, what part? If someone actually cares, then you say. But I swear this wasn't like me to take the conversation this way and asking you that last question. But going back to something that we were talking about pre-podcast, it is kind of controversial. We're talking about my body, my choice. One from the men perspective of getting drafted, the women perspective. Obviously, there's the abortion issue. One of the more kind of nuanced parts might not be the right way of explaining it, of that conversation, though, with the expressways. Well, if you're a pregnant woman, right, and if it's not your body inside of you, should you be able to drive in like the HOV lane because it's 2 people in the car? And to me, I think absolutely. Like if that's really where, we're going to have the problem, is whether or not someone can drive in an HOV lane if you're a pregnant lady, go right ahead, right? Then I think there are some problems with like HIPAA or whatever. If you get pulled over, well, as a woman, just say you're pregnant, right? So I'm not saying it's a perfect solution, if we were to, look at it in the way that I was talking. And I'm not saying this is the objective right way to look at it. I don't think that exists. Everyone, has to make their own decisions like we talked about for their family. But, if you look at it from the perspective of, you're a woman, a pregnant woman, right? And we all are aware as society, obviously there's still a lot of situations where this doesn't happen. You're not supposed to smoke cigarettes or drink alcohol, right? And I've never heard anyone ever, try to counter that. Oh yeah, and even Brian, our producer here, he's informed me that I did not, and I was not aware of this, that's illegal to drink alcohol as a pregnant woman. Right.
I'd never heard of that.
Right. And that is actually the case. And so it's like, we recognize that it's a different life, from a purpose of harming the baby, but again, terminating the baby, that's okay. And again, that's just my personal opinion on it. I'm not saying like everyone has to believe that or, that's right. But I just find it, a lot of people that if they're like, well, if that's the case, then we should be able to have pregnant women, you know, driving the HOV lane and count as two people. And it's like, if that's your holdup, absolutely, you know. I think that would make the world a lot better place than, and again, obviously, you know, there's situations to where like the whole my body, my choice, you know, to me, is you have the choice to not have reproductive sex, right? If you don't want to have the risk of bringing a child into the world, right? And obviously that's easier said than done, but I also find it funny, like in a place where we grew up in the Bible Belt, and I never really like thought of it that way because, you know, up here in like, here in Fulton County, but where I grew up in school, the Forsyth County school system, especially more rural, but I never really thought about it as being like super, and again, nothing wrong with having whatever beliefs that you have. I just was never a part of like the stereotypical like Christian sort of Bible Belt culture that we had here. And I didn't realize how apparent it was probably the first time until I think I was 7th, 8th grade. They actually had every single kid in the school as part of health class sign an abstinence pledge and, you know, do the abstinence ring. And here I am, not from a religious perspective. I'm like, you know, not something to probably be the most proud of, but the only one or one of the few people that voluntarily are still practicing abstinence, not from some like religious holier than that, but just because if I personally think from a my body, my choice perspective, your choice is to not have reproductive sex. It's not, oh, I made a mistake. Let me then take this baby who, hey, it may not be the best life that they're getting born into, but that's how you get the exceptions, not the rule, the diamond in the rough. And obviously, again, that being the exception, not the rule. But to me, like, who is anyone else to decide, like, hey, you're not going to get a life versus, hey, you may not have the best life, at least starting out, but, you know, at some point you will get to make of it, you know, what you will, right? Yeah. So I know you guys may not want to like touch that, you know, sort of topic with a 10-foot pole, but
I think you hit a primary thought process there, and that is that we don't have to interfere with each other.
Right.
You can have your own beliefs, they can have their own beliefs, and I don't think we necessarily have to cross paths with each other in those sections.
Right.
You do as you want to do, as long as it doesn't impinge on someone else. And then we have that dilemma of, is it a separate life? Is it not a separate life?
Right.
But, you know, in a legal argument, you know, could you charge that baby rent then?
Yeah.
What do they owe to the mother? You know, if it is a separate life, how do you separate that? I don't have the answer for sure, but in any aspect of any part of life, I would go with freedom, your choice,
right?
As long as it doesn't impinge on mine. But I've also always felt like when it comes to your body, your choice, if two people who do love each other are engaging in those activities, why shouldn't it be a conversation between the two of them?
Right.
Maybe it's not. It's up to those two people.
Right.
But then the other side of the ramification, I think Dave Chappelle said it, you know, if you get to choose whether or not to have it, do I get to choose whether or not to pay for it?
Right. Yeah.
It's a valid question. I don't know if there's an answer, though.
Well, and again, not to throw Brian, our producer, under the bus again, but he'll keep me up to date with some of these sort of culture issues, if you will. And now I guess it's a problem where sperm donors are even getting retroactively, you know, taxed with alimony or child support or, you know, whatever the case may be to take care of that child's life. And again, I'm not saying that's wrong or right, you know, but it is like there are real results or consequences. I'm not trying to say consequences like having a kid is a bad thing. I think it's probably one of the greatest things anyone can do in life, right? But it is a consequence, and like it's not just like, hey, it's an action and it's done. It's like at least another 18 years. Luckily, you know, like your child has, you know, healthy and, you know, is able to, you know, make it, you know, and obviously we live in a society where that's, you know, far less likely to have, you know, those sort of complications.
Does it make you wonder though? Like, I have two great daughters, so yeah. I've enjoyed being a father. I didn't, as a young man, think I would enjoy being a father, but I do have great daughters. So that being the case, I've enjoyed it. But yeah. What about those people who don't have great kids? The kids that are out there going crazy. The kids
Ask my parents.
How do they feel about it? Are they still happy they had kids?
My kid started a podcast, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
He's a rebel.
Yeah, I am very much looked at as, shocker, probably a contrarian, you know? And it's not like I'm ever trying to be a contrarian, I'm just trying to think independently, you know, and voice my opinion. And again, not saying I'm right or wrong, just, you know, voicing my opinion. And I think that's a right one that we have in this country to do. And two, like, I just feel like I'm not being myself if I'm not using my voice, you know, and whatever greatest extent I can. And again, not asking everyone else to do the same, but, you know, take the ideas that I have to share. And if, you know, hey, that's a great point, you know, take it and, you know, maybe also try to represent it and champion it. And I think that's something that so many people will like just get this idea and like cultivate it as it's their own, and like not able to separate it, you know, from like an attack on that idea as an attack on you as a person. And I look at ideas, and again, not an original thought by any stretch of the imagination, but like people are antennas. You might have heard something like this, you know, that you just have to be tuned to receive the idea, and then, you know, not every antenna is tuned to then like be a transceiver to rebroadcast that idea out, right? I just feel like, again, for what little part, you know, I play in, you know, the larger conversations happening across society, that, you know, I have a voice to offer. Jim, as much as he likes to downplay, you know, his voice, I think, again, there's so many people that aren't willing to admit, like, hey, I don't know, I'm not the most well-versed person, and much like myself, I will, you know, have a very passionate take on something that, again, I don't know definitively that's going to be true, but I like to think I'm a person that we can have that sort of conversation. If I'm, you know, passionate about this, and you think otherwise, that, you know, I can backtrack and, hey, I'm wrong. I'm more than happy to do that. Maybe Jim's not as quick to like jump to those same sort of, I hate to say that I jump to conclusions, but I think everyone does to some degree, right? Jim maybe not as quick to jump to those conclusions, but still has that, you know, ability to remain calm and collected, and not just like shoot down someone's idea just because they don't agree with it. Right?
You know, it's funny, and this might resonate with you as a musician. The first time my brother put the CD from Disturbed in my car, and it started with that song where he's wah, right? Yep. The monkey call or whatever it is. I was like, get that out of my car. What is that? I didn't listen to it at first. And this resonates with me as a person. I should have taken the time to then listen to this instead of just dismissing it out of hand. And part of that, of course, is because it was my brother, right, who wants their brother to introduce him to music.
Right.
But, you know, taking the time to listen to it, I actually ended up liking that album. And we as people, though, often dismiss something right out of hand, either because it wasn't our own idea, or it maybe wasn't something we liked immediately. And instead of embracing something new, we just dismiss it. I tried to change that in myself. Just because I've heard something I immediately don't like, I try not to just dismiss it out of hand and listen to the other side of it and actually accommodate the other person instead of just throwing the CD out the window. But how do you find that, like, in music?
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many times when we listen to something, an artist or a certain type of genre of music or whatever, and it might not resonate at first, but as you listen more to it, especially if you're studying it, and I spend a lot of my time studying music, and the more you study, I think with anything, you know, the more you study, the more you learn, the more you realize how much you have left to learn, how little you know, let's say, and then the appreciation value goes way up. And, you know, I find that a lot of music that when I first heard it, I may not have cared for it. As I learn more about it and give it time, I start liking it. So, yeah, that happens a lot. Several bands I'm in, actually, the music is kind of quirky, more finesse-based music. And as the band plays it, more and more I'm hearing more and more musicians say, you know, I'm really liking this music more and more. The more we play it as a group, you know, we grow into it. So that's
Who's your favorite bassist?
That's a tough one.
Favorite bassist or favorite racist?
My favorite racist is as a jazz guy, it would be Ray Brown. The great Ray Brown has since passed. I think he passed away in, I don't know, in the 90s, I believe, maybe early 2000s. Upright bass player, jazz player. Rock and roll would probably be John Entwistle of The Who. I was a big Who fan growing up, and I liked Rush, Geddy Lee of Rush.
Of course.
I'm a progressive type, music guy, so...
Now, are you pretending to know these names, or do you know these names? Because
I know Rush for sure.
Well, if you're a technical guy, you know Rush, because
Right.
their audience was and still to this day is predominantly male, and it's smart guys who, I'm not saying that about myself because I don't fit the mold, but you said that you went to Georgia Tech, right?
Yes.
Wow, and what was your degree?
Well, I studied electrical engineering, but I left a year early, so I did not get a degree.
Okay,
One
well,
of us.
electrical engineering, wow. Electrical engineering, wow, at Georgia Tech, wow. I mean, yeah, you're a Rush fan.
Oh, I
could
loved
see-
electrical engineering too. That was my jam. And Rush was often is either Rush or Metallica. If I was in the student center listening to music, back then you could go into a place where they gave you headphones and they played an album for you. It was very
Wow.
different.
That's crazy,
You
isn't it?
didn't have
Yeah.
a cell phone in your pocket, So studying Metallica, Rush.
Yeah.
I didn't really venture on much beyond those because I could. Led Zeppelin was the other one.
Yeah.
Listen to it without having to listen to it while I'm doing my homework. But I didn't recognize the first name you mentioned, the upright bass player.
Ray Brown. Yeah, in the jazz world, if you're a jazz musician,
Boring.
you know who Ray Brown is. Probably one of the top handful of dominant upright bass players. Ron Carter's another name. He's actually the most recorded bassist of the 20th century. He's on more albums than anybody else. People hiring him to play with them. So
Not Primus.
Les is it Les Claypool?
Yeah.
He's a crazy guy. He's a really interesting guy. Guarantee he's a smart guy. Guaranteed. And he's a real progressive rocker. And it's funny, but Kiss, Gene Simmons. Have you ever listened to an interview with Gene Simmons? He is a smart individual.
He is.
He's really a bright guy, and I saw an interview with him and Dan Rather, and he talked about coming from Israel over here and how impressed and all they were when they came over. And he walked into a supermarket and saw food and foodstuffs and all this abundance stacked to the roof. And he was like, we were basically living in poverty in Israel. And, he's totally about assimilation. When you move in or come to a new country, you assimilate. You learn English and you learn the ways and customs of that country as an American. And he really has a problem with people, all the bitching people, people complaining about how tough life is. He likes to say, hey, shut the hell up. My mother was in a concentration camp, Jewish person. And so they've overcome so many obstacles. He always steered clear of alcohol and drugs, and living the rock and roll lifestyle like those
gotta be hard
guys.
to do, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would think it would just be a part of life, and he never did that, and managed his money well, and he's in my opinion, he's the American dream.
Actually, kind of speaking of that, you may know him, Izzy Israeli. I don't know if he's still in PowerCore. I think he was on the Roswell team, but he at least owned, if not owns, Atlanta Diamond. And there's one up in the collection off of Exit 13, and then one right down the road, where I think it's in that Valero or like the Kroger parking lot. In any case. Also came over from Israel, lived in a kibbutz. Again, his name is Israel Israeli. Like that's his actual,
Really?
yeah, the most Jewish guy you'll ever meet, right?
His last name is Israeli?
Yes, and his first name is Israel. Yeah.
Wow.
Did he pick that or?
No, that was his birth name, legal,
Okay.
birth name. And he very much come over, and you got to assimilate, and grew up in a kibbutz, and he was talking. We were talking about the Atlanta soccer team, Atlanta United, and again, this was like 5 years ago. There's Josef Martinez, if you remember him. He was like our star striker.
The dyed hair, right?
Yeah,
blonde haired guy.
Yeah,
Martinez.
Yeah,
he was from Venezuela, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So. We were talking about him, and he was like, "What did you say?" He was like, "It's Joseph Martinez," because he's even like, if they come to America or we're talking about it in America, you use the Americanized version of the name. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? That's a different perspective than what you'll typically hear. I feel, and again, not that it's right or wrong, but again, it's his perspective, and he's not afraid to share it, which, I really respected, and kind of like this. And he might be another guy to, I hate to say it this way, if he's still kicking, have on to the podcast. Sure. He invited myself, and then one of our business partners, mine and Brian's business partners, Gerardo, he went to UGA, for electrical engineering.
They teach electrical engineering out there?
Barely.
Hey, more power to him.
He graduated, but unlike us. But in any case, he and I went out to Israel's house. He invited us to what he called Parliament, and he basically has his son, a couple other guys, and they'll drink a couple beers, smoke a cigar or whatever, and solve all the world's problems. Much like what we're doing now. And that just came to mind when you were talking about Gene Simmons. How I don't know how much that's ingrained in just the Israel culture, or I think you hear a lot about that even from Cuban immigrants, or anywhere where they actually did come from a very oppressive regime where you didn't have the same sort of civil freedoms that we have, and you actually and again, I'm not saying like only those people, but it seems like it's a lot more common to have that sort of mindset and perspective, coming over from
when you're not
places.
Used to the abundance that we have, and you come over here, and it speaks to how, in my opinion, a lot of people in this country, Americans, multiple generations that have lived here, they lose sight of how lucky and fortunate we are with all the blessings we have in this country, the freedoms we have, and the sky really is the limit, and that's how it was set up. And I don't know, man. There's just a lot of people. It's a shame to see people in my opinion, to see people in this country who lose sight of that and how fortunate we are, and let go of all this anger and all these things that are holding you back. Let go of them. Free yourself and reach for whatever it is that you want to reach for. That's the American dream.
Well, the sky's not even the limit. We've been to the moon, depending upon your perspective on that.
Yeah.
Well, I do think there is something to be said about, again, reaching for what you want, and having that ability here in America. But most people don't even take the first step in like, what do you actually want, right? And it's very easy, again, just kick that can down the road. And like, I've grown up with so many old people in my life, and like actually like old, like 70s, 80s, and like almost without exception, unfortunately, the reality has been like, they never figured out what they wanted to do in their life, right? And some handled that better than others, but it's cliche, but you don't want, in my opinion, you don't want to end up being like one of those people that like, I left most of what was to be done on the table, right? And maybe not the best way of putting it, but I think beyond that, the perspective of coming in and, making something of yourself has been lost from how easy life is here in America, right? Whereas like, it's easy to talk bad about how everything is, but it's only gotten that way over the last few decades because we've gone from a production society to a consumption society. And that was something that, I was thinking about when you're talking about like the whole maintenance, to you, like, that's not how you think about providing value, even though the customer is getting value out of it. A lot of our economy for better and for worse in some cases, has become, largely service-based, largely, I don't want to call it intangible, but, hard to quantify in some cases. And as we've shipped out all of our production of real tangible, goods that provide value to people. And, now it's, again, services and then media content or information, and I heard recently in a way that I'd never really thought about previously, how many people around the world, billions of people, hundreds of millions, that probably have just as good, if not better, takes on like philosophy, how to live a great life, that just don't even have the ability to broadcast that to the world at large, whether it's because of the government regulations, around free speech, or literally not being able to afford an iPhone, let alone like 3 cameras and all the audio equipment to put on a production like this. So I guess getting off my soapbox, so to speak, it is just like one of my biggest calls, especially related to drones, is get more people interested in production, because I mean, I know there's the whole tariffs, conversation, but we got to rip off that Band-Aid of, getting off, China's tit, that, is supplying the world at large for everything. And, there's a very real price to pay beyond, just, hey, we can now get our iPhone for $1,000, where a lot of people will say, oh, I would buy an iPhone if it was produced in America for $1,300, $1,400. How about try $4,000 or $5,000? Right.
And the problem is, though, we're not willing to let the things necessary to happen happen. If you look at the parts that some of this stuff is being mined from, lithium for batteries and stuff, they've destroyed parts of the planet to get these things out of the earth. Right. And no one wants that to happen in their backyard. Right. And we don't want giant holes in America where these things are going on. Right. And unless we're willing to let that happen, there's no way to bring that back.
Or it's, we got to be okay, instead of China basically funding and owning all the mining operations and, the Congo, and there's slave labor. It's either we got to be okay with us being the ones in China's place, or again, we just got to be happy with a lot less than what we've been accustomed to over the last couple decades. And unfortunately, that's not what most people are willing to do. So if you're not willing to give up more, got to produce more, but I know we are kind of running short. I would love to continue this conversation. I think we're getting into a good stride, but while we do have a few other minutes, are there any particular points that you wanted to address, talk about, promote on your end? Anywhere that Jim and I can be more help to you? Or
I honestly came out here to hang out with you guys. It was great to get in touch with you again.
Yeah, likewise.
I really am very thankful that you introduced me over to Sebastian. I think we did a great job for them getting their Wi-Fi put in. But I was also excited to hear about your drones and see what you were producing. Yep. At some point, we've got to talk more about that, because that's a fascinating thing to me. We have used drones in our own business, but nothing compared to what you do. Okay. Most of ours is just to either see something that's really high or get a better look at something. So I do think that's fascinating. Of course, I love music, so it's cool to hear you and listen to your podcast. I was very excited to listen to the things that you guys had to say in your other episodes. So I got to go back and finish the third one, though. I didn't get through that one all the way yet.
Yeah, it's quite a pain to listen to. No, I'm kidding. But Jon, really appreciate you coming on and joining us for this conversation, and love to do this again. And whether Brian and I were talking about this. We have, an office space up and coming where we do our drone production. Jim, was that your first time up there? Just a couple weeks ago or whenever that was. We did
I gave you guys a ride back to pick up a car, I think, a rental car.
Yeah.
We returned a rental car.
Yep, that's
I took
correct.
you back to your place, and we stopped off on the way.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, we do technically have a space to do something like this, but then it's pushing aside all of our production and R&D sort of equipment, and just trying to minimize that as much as possible. We do have a small little break room kitchen area, but the only reason why we can afford to be in the space that we're in, because the building owner was using that whole suite as his storage locker essentially, and he pushed it all over to one side, and we get one side, but he still has big filing cabinets in there that to do this sort of production just won't have enough space to do in there. But if nothing else, if you're willing to make the trek up to where there's still cows and
Absolutely.
pastures, love to have you up there. And failed to bring a charger for this drone, and I was like, I need to at least bring one of our drones here to like actually tangibly show you what we've been doing over the last few years. But that might have to wait till the next time to actually see it take flight. I might even be able to get like a few seconds off the ground if you're interested, but I didn't charge the battery. So
That's cool.
yeah. In any case, I think this is it for the episode. Jim, anything that you want to promote, upcoming gigs or anything?
Pleasure to meet John and learn about your company and everything. And
Thank you. And thank you for having me. And it was a pleasure to meet you in person finally. Like I said, when I got here, I feel like I almost know him because I've watched so much of the podcast already. So.
Oh, wow. That's.
But yeah, that and you know, Jim, because this is newer for him. Like he wasn't like a big podcast listener, still isn't a big podcast listener. But I will send him, you know, some recommendations every now and again, by and large political. And you know, Jim has asked, are there any downsides, you know, to doing this? And I mean, it's all your perception and mindset at the end of the day. But yeah, you are putting yourself out there, so you're opening up yourself to scrutiny. And yet, obviously, we're not at the level, you know, like Joe Rogan or anyone like that is, where like beyond the scrutiny, just like you don't have really a private life going out in public. Like everyone knows who the hell Joe Rogan is and is going to go try to get pictures with him or say hi, whether he's with his family, his kids, or anything. So,
and I think I said at the last one of these, we were talking about being in the arts and being a performing type person, like bands or whatever. You have to accept that you're going to be vulnerable. You know, you're going to be critiqued, and people are going to like you. Some are not going to like you, and you have to be okay with that. And it's, you know, you just got to come to terms with it. More people in this country, in my opinion, need to come to terms with that. And you can't try to be liked by everybody. Stop trying to be, you know, liked by everybody. Stand on, you're really good. I salute you in this way. You're very clear in your direction in that you want to stand on what you believe and you want to present yourself.
Even though it's going to isolate me from some people.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Especially in the tech space around here in Atlanta, there is a lot of people that want to protect the wealth that they've built up over the last couple of decades. So that makes them vote in a very specific way, you know, and it goes beyond voting. But yeah, there's a very real downside in some cases to, you know, expressing your opinion.
Yeah.
But again, John, thank you again.
Thank
and love to do this again.
All right.
Fantastic.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you.